of the worst parts of owning a car is the maintenance. I mean, especially if you're like me, where you've had old cars as a normal experience. You know this situation. You think you fixed the problem, but then it turns out you didn't fix the problem. And so you go on the internet and spend countless hours to figure out what the problem is. And then of course you spend money to try to fix the problem, try to finish this thing that is unfinished. And then you finally fix it. You finally finish it. But then at the end of the project, there's these 3 screws that you're missing, and you know that will come back to haunt you. Eventually, you tire of this rhythm of constant maintenance, and so you sell your car and you buy a new car. But then after the gleam of the new car wears off, you realize that you just traded things. You didn't finish anything. You traded the rhythm of regular maintenance for the rhythm of a monthly payment. It's still unfinished. And truth be told, this experience of being unfinished, I don't know, it shows up in every aspect of our life, in different seasons of our life. The journey of forgiveness. You thought you forgave that person, and it's been years. But then all of a sudden, you have a conversation or some experience happens, and it's as if you're transported to that very moment again. And that pain from that one experience shows up in the middle of your present, and you realize that your journey of forgiveness is still yet unfinished. Or maybe it's parenting. You spend 18 years pouring in to this child that you love, pouring into raising up, talking with about matters of faith and everything that you can, mistakes you've made, sharing the wisdom from those things, all of that. And then you think there's this new phase, that this phase is finished. And a few months later, you get a late night, teary-eyed call from a 19-year-old, and you recognize the journey of parenthood is still very much unfinished. It could be a journey of recovery, maybe one that you've been in for years, that you've seen lots of victory, but then you get blindsided out of the blue by temptation, and you're rudely awakened to the reality that that journey is still unfinished. Could be a journey of counseling, where you've made headway. Your counselor even acknowledges it. Your counselor sees it. Your spouse may say something, but then maybe because you didn't drink enough water or you didn't get enough sleep, you have a conversation and you're finding yourself drifting towards those same codependent behaviors, those same insecurities. It's still unfinished. If we're to be honest, the sense of being unfinished is not just an experience that we have, but it's also something that is part of us. Not just something we experience as being in the world, but part of our very soul. You see, while the gurus of consumeristic self-care might want to keep you from ever acknowledging anything you ever do, might have bad motivations or might be wrong, Scripture is a little bit more honest. Scripture says, all have fallen short of the glory. Scripture says there's a part of us that is left unfinished. And if we can get to that acknowledgement, if we can get to the place where we recognize that there's parts of us that are still to be completed, are not yet done, that we're very much on a journey, if we can get to that place in the middle of that recognition that we have brokenness and we're bruised by our own bad choices, and too often we're admittedly blind to our own toxic self-infatuation, in the middle of that, in the middle of our own mud, we'll often find Jesus. Some scholars say that the cross may have weighed 165 pounds, which is roughly my weight in a moment of transparency. So you could say that Jesus carried my weight as he walked towards the place where he was crucified. Jesus carried your weight as he walked to the place where he was crucified. The unfinished parts of your life, the unfinished parts of my life, that's what Jesus was carrying. The Gospels tell us that he was beaten, wearing the marks of whips, mocked on all sides. Imagine that. History tells us, or tradition tells us, that this was called the Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering, as the Latin means. Hearing the sounds of the mocking, feeling the pain from the whip wounds in the Middle Eastern sun. Imagine that. Imagine the pain. His disciples mostly watching at a safe distance. A man named Simeon from North Africa who didn't know him at all, the only one that's actually helping him in the moment. And after finishing that journey, the Via Dolorosa, he finally emerges to this place that's called Golgotha. In the Aramaic, it means the valley of the skull. Quite a journey. The word excruciating was a word that had to be invented to define and describe the type of pain that Jesus and others that have been crucified throughout history endured by the cross. A trinity of nails fastening you in place, holding you propped up, arms wide open, but no one is coming to hug you. But it's not just the sheer pain of the nails and the bleeding out that would eventually lead you to passing away. It's suffocation, as the muscles tire from bringing you up to take a gulp of air, and eventually you sink in, caved in, unable to even breathe. Excruciating. But in an honor-shame society, it isn't just the physical pain that is a part of the pain, it's the public spectacle. As people know your family members, and their family, your family is being shamed by you being up there. It's not something that they'll ever be able to walk back. Jesus endured the shame of the cross. The tool the Romans would use to try to just demonstrate their power and the utter hopelessness of anyone that would do anything against their will. The physical pain, the social pain. But in honest, it goes deeper than just social and physical pain, because Scripture asserts that there on the cross, all of our individual unfinishedness, the freight of our mistakes, the heap of millennia of injustice, the sin covered over and hidden from observable public display, protected from those that might see it, all the secret hidden sins, the toxic cultures that we've facilitated and created that breed out racism and sexism and other isms, the arrogance and hypocrisy that would cancel others without looking inward. And then the acts also for which people are canceled for. The secret thoughts that affect and cripple how we treat each other. Abuse, gossip, dissension, disobedience, every unfortunate, infamous, subtle sin. It's all a mark of our unfinishedness. And it all fell on Jesus. The spiritual pain, far greater than the physical and the social. Paul would later write, "He who knew no sin, the one who is truly perfect, the one who brought light to blind eyes, closed sores of the lepers, who shared truth like none had ever." They marveled, saying, "Who has been able to speak like this?" Jesus himself, who knew no sin, became sin. He became the object of unfinishedness that was ours, but fell on him like a freight train. And with his last words, as he drew up to try to take a breath, he said 3 things. It is finished. It is finished. What we could not finish, Christ on the cross has finished on our behalf. Now, as a father, I've read lots of books to my children. I've watched lots of movies as a family. And there's like this pervasive theme in these movies that are children's movies that is actually, interestingly enough, very true. There is always a great catastrophe, a great rescue, and at great personal cost to the one rescuing. What Good Friday teaches us is that this theme that shows up in cinema and fiction is actually woven around the very universe, woven around existence, woven around history, woven into the very heart of God. That he would take our unfinishedness and yell out, declare with his dying breath, it is finished. If anyone is in Christ, they are a new creation, Paul says. We no longer have to work to prove ourselves in the worth of our own eyes, or in the eyes of others, or in the eyes even of God. Our loose ends are fastened together at the cross. Our crooked lines are made straight at the cross. The attempt to justify ourselves to ourselves, to others, to cover over our brokenness with good works or good luck or good looks and good grades, all of that is unnecessary. We are not the sum of our unfinishedness we find at the cross if we come to the place where we confess and admit our own unfinishedness. We are not finally the sum of our unfinishedness. We are the sum of his finished work. The critic and the accuser stand condemned, and us, the defendants, walk free and innocent. This is the beauty of Good Friday. He who knew no sin became sin for us so that we might become the righteousness of God, that we might be made right. All that is unfinished in ourselves does not stand against us. This is Good Friday.